Should we revise? ये आगे बढ़ेंगे? करना क्या है बताओ? आगे बढ़ेंगे?
Can we revise? I want to say the last class.
Can we?
Revise what you were doing.
वो डेली सोप थोड़ी है जो हर बार कभी भी चैनल खोलो कभी भी मिलेगा। वो डेली सोप नहीं है। Last class हाँ, that girl also she was absent. क्यों? दोनों कहाँ गए थे? And ये? Seriously? Then stand up and because for having not allowed. Keep yourself fit. Last class what did we study? Our environment that we started with बचा है ना थोड़ा सा बचा है. Till where we studied? Primary food chain हुआ? तो आर एनवायरनमेंट कहाँ तक क्या बता फटाफट अच्छा मतलब फूड चेन ओनली वी विल डिस्कसिंग लेट अस स्टार्ट फ्रॉम देयर ओनली हाँ फूड चेन ओनली आई एम स्टार्टिंग सो फूड चेन से ही डिस्कस करना है चैप्टर इज वेरी इजी there is nothing much to understand. Let us start with the concept of food chain. How are you supposed to define what is food chain? The feeding relationship between different organisms. Feeding relationship between different organisms. So, if I talk about certain plants, say suppose I talk about some grasses. Grasses are fed upon by beetles, by grasshoppers. Grasshoppers will be fed upon by snakes. So grasshoppers to snake नहीं खाएगा, right? Snake will not feed on grasshoppers. Snake will feed on bigger animals, frogs, and then snakes. So how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let us talk about what is the food chain. How should you write a food chain? Certain different examples. So here we start with the concept of a food chain. Definition I just now told you. What is a food chain? Feeding relationship between different organisms. And this different group of organisms. What are these different group of organisms known as? These are known as trophic levels. So what are the different levels here? How many different group of organisms we wrote? Different group of organisms that we wrote are trophic levels. How many trophic levels generally we come across in a food chain? 3 minimum, maximum 5, rarely 6, and above 6 not possible. So what is the average number of food chains? Average number of trophic level in a food chain? 3 to 5. What is the reason? We'll have to come across. Now, each of these groups, what are these groups known as? We will talk about that these groups are known as producers. Why producers? Because these group of organisms, the grasses, plants, blue-green algae in the water, these group of organisms are capable of absorbing the sunlight, utilize substances in the environment and make organic food, process known as photosynthesis. But now that we are talking about that, the incident sunlight falling on them, the sunlight falling on these plants, how much of the sunlight would they utilize for making the food? Only 1%. So this, when I say that how much of the incident sunlight would they generally use for the process of making food by the process of photosynthesis? Only 1% of the incident sunlight, nothing more than that. Now that they have utilized only 1% of the sunlight and they have been able to make food, that's why they are known as producers. Producers. What is the other word? Producers, or they are also known as autotrophs. But this side, right from the beetles till the snake or any other example we write, all of these organisms will be considered as heterotrophs. But then, or consumer, yes, they are consumer because they are not making anything, but they are feeding on the food. But since we are talking about the simple to the complex group of organisms, so the type of the consumer also has to be specified when you write examples. What are these known as? This will be termed as the primary consumers. This will be termed as the secondary consumer. Then this will be termed as the tertiary consumer. So whenever you write examples, this has to be mentioned this way, and this has to be the top consumer. Now, in certain examples, when we write, we may also see that the top consumer may be a scavenger. Okay, if you are fitting in examples like the eagle and the hawk there, then it can be a scavenger, but the snakes are not scavengers, so we are writing the top consumer. If it is a scavenger, then we have to mention. But otherwise, when I talk about them, what is common in all of them? What is common in all of them? What is this common category? They all are heterotrophs. The other way of writing them is when I say that yes, they all are heterotrophs, I would say that these all are heterotrophs. Can you give me a suitable word for this? Primary consumer. Look into the example and give a suitable word for the primary consumer. What can this primary consumer be also known as? Can I say that they can also be termed as the herbivorous animals? Yes. What about this small carnivore, the big carnivore? Now here, especially this is an insectivore that I talk about. This is also insectivore. But when we write the levels, we generally don't write insectivorous or something. Carnivore, small carnivore, big carnivore, that way we can write. So these are all carnivores. What is common? These are all carnivores, all these type of organisms, because they are feeding on some animal forms. That's why carnivore. Then next is the next concept that we try understanding would be these are the levels. Now we try understanding why 3 to 5 level. Why nothing beyond this? Why 3 to 5 level? Because whatever amount of energy the grasses or any plant has prepared, how much of the energy will the beetle get when it feeds on the grass? The amount of energy that will pass on from the grasses to the beetle when the beetle is feeding on the grass is nothing more than 10%. If I assume that, for example, these grasses have prepared something like this, any unit, any number we are talking about right now, that these plants have manufactured glucose and the amount of the chemical energy that they are storing is roughly around 1000 joules, 1000 kilojoules. Then the beetle that feeds on the grasses, how much of the energy would this beetle get? Nothing more than 10%. How much of the energy would the grasshoppers get when it feed on the beetles? Nothing more than 10%. Same here, how much of the energy does the frogs get? Nothing more than 10%. And here also the same. That's the reason this entire concept of the food chain and the transfer of the chemical energy by the way of food is also known as a 10% law of energy flow.
So the snakes get the least amount of
Least,
energy.
yes. That is the reason every organism feeds not only one type of organism, no. Every organism will feed on multiple other organisms, that's why. Every organism will always have alternate food, that's why. So I'm saying, what is the next concept again to understand? We are learning 10% law of energy flow. What is energy flow? The flow of energy by the way of food. Here we are talking about the flow of energy by the way of food, where every organism is eating on the previous trophic level and being eaten by the next trophic level. Every trophic level is eating the previous and being eaten by the next. Eating the previous and being eaten by the next. Correct? No? Now, next is we try understanding then that if this is something that we are assuming that how 1000 kilojoules these grasses have manufactured in the form of energy, then how much is the beetle getting? Nothing more than that as per this 10% rule. How much would the grasshoppers get? Nothing more than this as per the 10% rule. What about this? Nothing more than this as per the 10% rule. As per the 10% rule. What about this? If there would have been something, how much? So less, no, that is? So less, that is? So if I understand that you get a question why most of the food chains have trophic level 3 to 5, your answer always should be that after the 5th trophic level, the amount of energy that can be passed on to the next trophic level is negligible. Whichever example we talk about. Whichever example we talk about. Now, this is the basic concept of the 10% energy flow. Can you write one food chain considering human? Koshish karo. Right, let me give you a question there. Give an example, write an example of a food chain. Write an example of a food chain where human occupies a trophic level. Write an example of a food chain where human occupies a trophic level. Where human occupies a trophic level. Write one example. What?
Shall I say?
Bolo.
First is worms, then fish, then humans, then eagle. Is this okay?
Eagle human को खाएगा?
हाँ मरने के बाद तो खा लेगा। अच्छा वैसे
Not that way. A typical relation of food you'll have to write. Anybody else? Likha?
Seed or
Plants.
grasses,
हाँ.
then chicken, then human.
हाँ. Correct. और human के बाद हम कुछ नहीं लिख सकते. Whenever you are writing, now this type of an question when comes in the paper, whenever we are talking about, because we are the most complex group of organisms, only when we die, तब का अलग बात है. Regular condition में, is there any organism regularly feeding on human? No. No. So if whenever human dying away, is it actually directly causing an imbalance to nature? No. So that's why we cannot write any organism above human. You can write an example with 3, with 4 levels, but human try to fit in. I'll give you 2 more minutes. Karo fast. Think. Done? Tell me now. Likha?
I have got one.
Example likha?
Yeah.
Bolo.
Protozoa, small fish, big fish, and
Protozoa कैसे से?
protein.
Proteins?
No, wait.
हाँ.
Protozoa,
Ah.
small fish, big fish, and then human.
Protozoa.
Small fish, big fish, human.
Who is making the food?
Protozoa.
Which protozoa is autotrophic?
Wait. What is it? Zoo.
Which protozoa is autotrophic?
Zoo for plant. Yeah, sorry.
Phytoplankton it has to be. If you are writing that, and that is applicable only in the water. Only in the water, phytoplankton if you are writing. Then that is only for, if it is a question, write an example of a food chain, aquatic food chain, then you can write this. Then how will it start? Phytoplankton. Zooplanktons, they cannot prepare food. Phytoplanktons. Then this phytoplanktons will be fed upon by the zooplankton. These are the animal parts. This will be fed upon by the, there are various different type of diatoms are there. This will be fed upon by the small fishes, and this can be fed upon by the big fishes. Okay. So, यहाँ पे many other examples we can write. Zooplankton, diatoms के जगह पे, some jellyfishes, and this is all those small invertebrates you can fit in any. But this is, what is the limitation of this? Only in the water. Only in the water body this is. This type of planktons are small microorganisms present in the water. They are not in the land. The general organisms, my question was fit in human way.
Can I write last? Big fish.
No, but human, we are not surviving in the water. No? Ye example only for aquatic organisms hoga. Though we feed on fish, but these organisms should be surviving on the same habitat. Kaise question aata hai? You will give an example of a terrestrial food chain.
Grass.
Grass,
goat, human.
Grass, goat, human, correct.
This is very common one because I thought everyone would have written that as a control.
No. Grass, goat, human you can write. Also we can talk about grass or big plants. Say suppose I talk about any terrestrial plant. A fruit plant, for example, then birds, or say suppose then first worms, and then worms ke baad birds, and then human. No, there are so many these birds and the poultry which human feed on. So us tarah se you can write, or else you can talk about typical organisms straight away a small herbivore. Straight away a small herbivore, the goat and the sheep and the small herbivore, and then straight away the human. So whenever we try fitting in human, you'll have to remember that the number of trophic levels will as it is be much less. So that is one concept to remember when you write in your exams. Energy flow, this concept you are understanding. Now, this type, now let us try understanding. The beetles, if suddenly in one environment, now this is typically talking about a land, a terrestrial food, terrestrial meaning on the land, the forest-like conditions, etc. If the number of grasshoppers are decreasing, what will happen? Number of grasshoppers decreasing suddenly due to environmental conditions, what will happen? The beetles are increasing, frogs are decreasing because frogs are not getting adequate food, and this is not being eaten. No. So its predator is, at least one predator is not there. So that's why
also the amount of grass or the green cover will reduce because beetles.
Yes. So can we say that the decreasing of any one trophic level in nature brings about a whole lot of ecological imbalance? Yes. So you get this type of questions also. This type of examples will be there, or you will be asked to write an example, and then if one of the trophic level is becoming excessive, say suppose suddenly due to some environmental factors, the number of the grasshopper increase, then what will happen? It will impact on the beetles because the population of the beetles will be becoming very, very scarce. So this is what we'll have to explain this way. But then under all general conditions, what are we supposed to understand also? That these grasshoppers that I mentioned, Is it necessary that the grasshoppers will only feed on the beetles? No, the grasshoppers may feed on the flies. The grasshoppers may feed on the other different type of insects, small insects. Is it necessary the frogs will only feed on the grasshoppers? No, the frogs may feed on so many other different type of worms are there. So many other different locusts are there. Big praying mantises are there. Small grasshoppers are so many other different type of insects are there. The frogs may feed on some other type. Why is it necessary? So that every organism has got multiple food, multiple feeding relationship they are dependent on. This type of a concept that we talk about theoretically is okay, but practically not possible. Meaning, every organism has got multiple choices for food, just like us. Are we only feeding on the cauliflower? Are we only feeding on the egg? Are we only no, we have got multiple choices. Sometimes if this is less, doesn't matter, we have that. If that is less, doesn't matter, we have this. Exactly in nature, that is for every organism. Talk about the frog, talk about the snake, they have got multiple choices for food. So that means a single food chain actually is not existing in nature. There are multiple food chains always existing in nature. So what are those multiple food chains known as? Food web. What is a food web? A network of food chains. A network of food chains where all the food chains are simultaneously working. Whenever we are talking about a food chain, it is not that, just now as I said, it is not that a single food chain will always work in a nature. It is not that there is particular rule every time. No, the grasshopper will have many choices, the frog will have many choices. So in nature, a food web always is functional. A food web always is functional. What is the definition of a food web? The definition of a food web is interlinking food chains. A network of interlinking food chains. What is the benefit of food web in nature? Every organism has got different amount of food, different types of food in adequate amount. For this particular type of an organism, say suppose now for the spider, now for this type of an organism, or for the eagle, if this type of an organism is less, the eagle can feed on this, the eagle can feed on this. So the eagle has other different choices. It can feed on the foxes, it can feed on the rabbit, it can feed on the deer. So many other choices it has. So does a single food chain ever exist in nature? No. Always a network of food chains work together, and that concept is known as a food web. Next is, after the concept of the food web and the food chain, little bit here you'll have to come across the consumer. What is the role of the consumer? And then now that we were talking about the concept of, I think the other day, we were talking about the concept of ecosystem. That is another topic that you have in your book. Just have a look there. The ecosystem. What is the meaning of the word ecosystem? Now that we talk about a terrestrial environment or an aquatic environment, what is the condition? The condition is, I may understand that the grasshopper, which is a animal form. So this grasshopper, which is an animal form, will be considered as a biotic component of the nature. At the same time, is this grasshopper or the frog able to survive on its own and not dependent on the water and the soil and the nutrients? No, they are very much dependent on all these factors. No, the temperature, the humidity, the all the other different type of factors like the water and the minerals, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So they are very much dependent. So the biotic factors are always dependent on the abiotic factors. In any environment, you talk about the desert, you talk about the lake, pond, ocean, you talk about the river, you talk about the forest. Everywhere, the biotic and the abiotic components are always interacting together and allowing the organism to survive. So if that is true, this type of an environment where the abiotic and the biotic components always survive together, that is what is known as an ecosystem. What is an ecosystem? It is a self-sustained area, self-satisfactory area where every biotic component can very much survive because it has got so many other abiotic factors to support its growth and multiplication and its survival. The oxygen, yes, very much necessary. Water, yes, very much necessary. Minerals, very much necessary, etc., etc. So we are talking about the producers. What is the role of the producer in any environment? Prepare food, organic food, by the method of photosynthesis, etc. And what is the role of the consumers? One after the other, they are dependent on each other for food. The primary consumers, herbivore. What is the definition? They always directly feed on plants or plant food. Secondary consumer, they will be directly feeding on the herbivore, not directly on the plant ever. They will not directly feed on the plant ever, but by the way of a small animal form, they are feeding on the plant indirectly. So like this. So if I talk about the beetles, instead of the beetles, if I put here the rabbit. If I put here the rabbit, then here what? Foxes. If the fox here, then they what? Eagle. Eagle, correct. And if the eagle there, anything after that? No. So you'll have to remember from time to time what examples you select and then the level you'll have to decide. Okay, so that way. So when we are talking about this, what are we saying? Every type of an organism. Then what is the difference between a herbivore and carnivore? Difference between a herbivore and carnivore. Carnivore would always depend on flesh, depend on animal food. What is an omnivore? Dependent both on the plant and the animal food. What is a decomposer? Now if the plant and the animal parts have fallen dead on the surface of the soil or the water, in a short period of time they should be mixed with the soil, mixed with the water. What type of organism will generally play an important role? Microbes. For example, microbes such as which type of microbes majorly play an important role in decomposition? Fungi. But इससे भी ज़्यादा bacteria. Bacteria majorly play an important role in the process of decomposition. Fungi actually they don't help in the process of decomposition, but they start growing in the decomposing surfaces because they start obtaining nourishment from the decomposing surfaces. So that's the reason the fungi are known as. अरे life process food first concept तो वही था. Saprophytes. So the type of organisms, you get a question that the type of organisms which help in the process of decomposition. Bacteria, the first thing to write. Bacteria are the most important organisms that help in the process of decomposition. Plant part, animal part, soil में, water में, कहीं पे भी. But fungi definitely there in the site of decomposition always. But fungi, they are themselves not breaking down the organic food into simpler forms, plant, animal, dead parts. But the moment जब decomposition शुरू हो गया, then the fungus will start growing there because they always feed on the soluble nutrients of the dead and the decomposing organic matter. Okay. So now, what is the job of a decomposer? अभी ये थोड़ा जानना है. Is decomposition a necessary process? Yes. Why? If the process of decomposition, then the complex organic substances in the form of the plant and the animal bodies directly gets mixed with the soil and the water, making the soil and the water even more nutritive, helping the growth of the plant. The region of the soil where the process of decomposition is happening, the surface top layer is becoming even more fertile. What is that called? What is that called? Humus. And then, when we are talking about the presence of the humus, yes, the soil is becoming fertile. On top of that, wherever the process of decomposition is happening, the soil is becoming porous. The air is getting more trapped, oxygen is getting more trapped, the growth of the microbes even more. And the water holding capacity is also becoming more, so that particular region, jahan pe, decomposition like this is happening quite often. So that's the reason we understand the forest lands so fertile. The forest land is so fertile because the soil type and the decomposition constantly happening. Soil microbes in large amount. The water holding capacity so much. The water is just not running off. The water will remain in the soil for a long period of time. The soil is always moist, that's why. Unlike a desert, where the water holding capacity is so less, decomposition hota hi nahi hai, wahan pe the soil does not have any microbes. So when we are talking about the role of decomposition, take there in the volume. So you have to read all these. The role of decomposer is very, very important. A question that you always get in your paper. What is the role of decomposition? Next is, after the concept of this, we will look into some environmental issues. What are some of the environmental issues that we are going to talk about? Environmental issues like, I think two major environmental issues we have to talk about. That is waste disposal. I think, no? Just see the topic. Next is, there is one more concept there, the pyramids. No, ecological pyramids are there. You're right? Okay. Try to put in this in the form of an ecological pyramid. Take only one example. It's very easy. Once you know any example, you'll be able to draw. क्या करना है? Draw a neat, nice pyramid. Start fast. 5 minutes. Take one. You have to draw one big triangle, and this big triangle you have to divide in 5 parts. Divide in 5 parts. Here you will write down the trophic level. Here you will have to write down the trophic levels. You try to fit in now. Trophic level, how many trophic levels? 5 trophic levels in this example I have written, or if you want you can write one more example also, no problem. Write another example also. यहाँ पे trophic levels लिखना है. On one side you have to write what is the nature of the trophic level. For example, producers, and go on. And इस तरह से go on. This side what will you write? Autotrophs. This side you will write autotrophs. And here, not heterotrophs, but the category of heterotrophs. You can write herbivores and then go ahead. Come on, fast. Example, you can write this or you can write any other. Fast, fast, fast. Should not take so much.
Okay.
क्या हुआ?
Only the second trophic level will be herbivore, right?
What is it?
Only the second trophic level.
So here if I write herbivore, small carnivore, big carnivore, top carnivore, या तो अगर eagle लिखा है तो scavenger.
There are certain
हाँ
heteromerous plants as well, right?
हाँ
Which depend on other plants.
हाँ like something like when we are talking about the venus plant, insectivorous, carnivorous plants are also there, like the geoderm, pitcher plant. So that, but if you write those examples in appropriate, other trophic levels also has to fit in. So can we straight away write those examples here? No. Write the typical examples. A proper autotrophic plant you write. But definitely they are also a part of the food chain. Yes, yes. They are also a part of the food chain. None? Now look into the next topic. We are talking about what? What is it? Environmental issues. I think we have to talk about this. Some environmental pollution. Okay. Biomagnification, let us just talk about one of these concepts. Biomagnification, what is the meaning of that? Biomagnification here means that, what is the meaning of biomagnification? Biomagnification, you understand the same meaning here also. But here, what is the concept? Biomagnification, if I say that in any agricultural lands, suppose, now they are talking about the water. Let us talk about any agricultural land. In the agricultural land, the plants are grown. In the process of growing the plants, the pesticides are being used. The fungicides are being used. The herbicides are being used. So that means the soil has got adequate amount of those poisonous chemical substances. The plant parts also has. Now, if I try to fit in certain examples, say suppose we talk about ourselves now. So now in this case, these are some plants. I may talk about the rice plants here. I talk about the rice plants, any type of a plant where human directly feeds on. So I talk about the rice plants, and then these rice plants may be fed upon by some rice or the wheat plants, if I consider. They may be fed upon by any type of a bird, general plants, then I take, fed upon by certain birds or human birds, poultry, fed upon by human. Now, if this is a simple food chain, the plants in the process of growth, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, all used. The birds. Now, if I understand that almost about 5 different birds are feeding on these plants. 5 different birds feeding on this single plant. So every bird is consuming small amount of every bird is gathering small amount of those poisonous chemical substances. But now, if I talk about that, these 5 different birds are there, where the ducks or the poultry or etc. if I talk about the different. So out of this, we understand that these birds, at least 2 different type of birds and its products, human feed on. But it is not only the birds that the birds only will be dependent. I understand that yes, apart from the birds, we also understand that the goats are also feeding on these plants. We also understand that there are some other different type of animals which would be directly feeding on these plants. Say, suppose I talk about give me some other examples. Rabbit directly not related to human. Not directly related to human.
Chicken.
Poultry. Poultry will all come there. So, say suppose I talk about the goat, I talk about the cattle. Okay. Now, just here, when I talk about that the goat, as it feeds on the plant, maybe some proportion of the poisonous chemical substances enter into the body of the goat. So the human is feeding on the goat, so adequate amount of these poisonous chemical substances entering into the body of the human. So now that the goat feeds on the plants, now that the birds feed on the plant, now that the cattle feed on the plant, each one of them consuming or gathering a small proportion of those poisonous chemical substances from the plant individually. But the human is omnivorous, no? The human is omnivorous. So the human is feeding on the goat and its products. Human is feeding on 2-3 different types of birds or the eggs, etc. The human is feeding on the cattle and its products. And the human is also directly feeding on the plant products. Human is directly feeding on the plant product. So now, the concentration of those chemical substances that we are talking about, which may be in the form of the herbicide, insecticides, fertilizers, etc., will be in the maximum found in its maximum concentration way in each of these organisms, or maximally found in the human tissues. Maximally found in the human tissues, because each of them, whatever they have gathered from the plant in small amounts, the human is gathering from each one of them and also directly from the plant. So these type of chemical substances in the course of food chain, always it has been found that whether I talk about an aquatic environment or I talk about a terrestrial environment, since human is always at the top of a food chain, the human is directly or indirectly dependent on all the lower trophic levels. The human is always directly and indirectly. Here I am saying that the human is directly dependent on all the trophic levels. I talk about this example. Yes, the human is indirectly dependent on all these trophic levels. So in this case, what is happening, since human is at the top, at the pinnacle of a food chain, it is always found that this human is gathering these poisonous chemical substances from each of these sources. But what is the worry if the human is gathering all these poisonous chemical substances? The worry is the moment I talk about the fertilizers and the pesticides and the herbicides and the fungicides, they will remain in the tissues and they are not getting broken down. They are not getting converted to anything simpler to be released out by the way of the kidneys. But only that they are getting deposited in our tissues, in our blood, and resulting in various different type of irregular malfunctioning of the body tissues. So that is what we are trying to understand, where the magnification mode and why. And the answer for why, you always have to write this basic concept that human being omnivorous, the reason this way. So, and two concepts, human is omnivorous and at the same time human is always at the top of the food chain. Okay. So this is what the concept of biomagnification, when you read the points in the volume, very, very clear.
Environmental, biological magnification.
Biological magnification.
Harmful chemicals enter our body.
No, you read for yourself later. You बहुत simple है, concepts are very simple. Now let us talk about the concept of environmental issues. सबसे important जो है, that is ozone depletion. What is ozone depletion? What do you know about it?
Did you ever read by the ACs like chlorofluorocarbons?
Chlorofluorocarbon. Acha. So now that I talk about the concept of ozone depletion. What is ozone? What will you write? What is ozone? Ozone is the triatomic form of oxygen. अब जो ये triatomic form of oxygen है, it is naturally formed in the atmosphere. The triatomic form of oxygen is naturally formed in the atmosphere. So when I talk about the entire envelope of the water vapor, the gaseous envelope surrounding our planet, which has got different layers, and talking about these layers, just certain names specific you'll have to remember. Talking about these layers, it is actually close to the stratosphere, a specific layer known as ozonosphere. What is rich in this ozonosphere? It is rich in or concentrated with ozone. Ozone formed by the combination of the nascent oxygen, meaning the oxygen atom and the oxygen molecule. The oxygen atom and the oxygen molecule together, resulting in the formation of this triatomic form of oxygen. So this concept you should always write. But the worry is, first of all, what is the job? The ozone layer, what is its job? The job of the ozone layer is preventing
ultraviolet
radiations from
the sun's radiations. Yes, certain amount of the radiations or certain type of the radiation, the spectrum of the radiation is not very good for us living organisms and the plants. The ultraviolet A, the ultraviolet B that we understand, The UV radiations that we understand, these UV radiations are not very good for the plants and the animals. And in certain parts of the day when the intensity of the sunlight is very high, this type of radiations are found immensely in the atmosphere. So now, if these radiations are a part of the sun's sunlight, a part of the sunlight, a part of the spectrum of the sunlight, then if it is entering the surface of the earth, or it is entering the outer surface of the earth in large amount, then what is the problem that we are supposed to face? We may suffer from variety of different type of deformities, variety of different type of irregular functions. But this ozone layer is constantly protecting us from the harmful effects of these radiations for years, for decades. So this ozone layer is not allowing adequate amount of this UV radiation enter the deeper layers and come in contact with the surface of the earth, in contact with the plants and the animals. Then this ozone layer for the last 2 decades has been found that it is thinning down at certain regions of in certain geographical regions. So when we are talking about a concept of ozone hole, for ease of understanding, we always see images and pictures, no, as if there's a hole, but practically there is no hole as such. The concept of ozone hole is that this layer of the ozone, which is supposed to be of a specific thickness, in certain geographical areas it has little bit thinned down. Thinned down meaning this triatomic form of the oxygen is breaking off. Why breaking off? Because of the concentration of certain poisonous chemical substances. What are those poisonous chemical substances? Poisonous chemical substances are many. To talk about some of them, yes, CFCs. There are many. CFC stands for what? Chlorofluorocarbons. Even the hydrochlorofluorocarbon are even more toxic. Chlorofluorocarbon are comparatively lesser. The HCFCs, these are called HCFCs, these are even more toxic. Apart from that, there are halones, HALONs, these are even more toxic. So ये जो हाइड्रोक्लोरोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स है, CFCs है, halones है, variety of hydrocarbons है, which are released from different practices from the surface of the earth. What are some? Most common practices on the surface of the earth is what? The use of coolants. Variety of coolants which are used in the industries, big industries and factories, the coolants that they use in the process of burning or in the process of allowing various different type of processes and machines, the coolants which are used are found to release poisonous chemical substances in the form of HCFCs and CFCs. Then, if I talk about, are we also responsible for that? Yes, we are using the refrigerator and the ACs. We travel places which we could have traveled in 2 days, we are traveling in 2 hours. The aircraft that we take, every flight taking off, huge amount of HCFC is released into the atmosphere. So looking into that, yes, we human only, we are responsible for releasing all these different type of poisonous chemical substances. But the impact is what now? The impact is that this ozone getting broken down in certain regions. The breakdown is very fast, and this ozone which is supposed to be formed naturally, that forming is not happening naturally. Ozone is supposed to be formed naturally in the atmosphere, but that forming is not, the formation nahi ho raha hai, but the breaking down of the bonds is quite prominently understood in those regions. Now, what are those regions? Which are the regions still being more or less recognized, more or less understood? Are you aware? Which are the regions of the geographical areas where the thinning down of the ozone layer has been more or less understood? Continents like Australia. Is it near the Arctic region or the Antarctic? Australia is where? Up or down?
Down.
Antarctic. So when we are talking about this particular region, where it has been found that maybe because of the air pressure, the humidity, the temperature, etc., various different type of environmental factors are there, which are found to be responsible for the thinning down of the ozone layer. Now, so many countries, majorly this particular continent is found to be affected, but surrounding continents also. But again, the question arises, this particular continent as compared to other continents may not be having that many industries, factories, etc. in comparison to when we are talking about Europe and America, maybe not these countries. But the explanation is the environmental factors. When we understand, not necessarily that the release of the toxic chemical substances and their own ozone hole, the toxic chemical substances, because of certain geographical factors and environmental conditions, they are carried away by the air pressure and so many other reasons where the ozone hole has been till date found majorly in these regions. So now that the ozone layer is little bit thin, people or the plants in those particular countries and continents have been found to suffer from certain different type of conditions as compared to the rest of the world. What are some of the problems? The plants, let me talk first. The plants at those regions are grown with extra different type of more specialized methods. The plants in those regions cannot be grown very commonly or with general methods like perhaps our country. The plants are grown with various different type of precautionary measures and etc. Because naturally those plants will not be able to grow. They show stunted growth. Naturally those seeds will not be able to show the process of germination. They always show delayed germination. So those plants and those areas, they have got developed methods of growing plants with a lot of human manipulation, with a lot of manipulating the environmental conditions, because under normal conditions, the process of germination and growth of the plants will not be happening that anyway. Secondly, talking about the animal impact. Now that the ozone layer is thinning down, what is happening? Definitely the ultraviolet radiations are entering more. Certain regions of that continent are more exposed to the UV radiations. So talking about the impact on human, what are some? Young children are seen to suffer from rashes. Skin rashes are very common feature, people of those countries. Rashes on the skin, and this is not very much easily curable, leading to skin cancer. Second is vision problems found in young children, leading to cataracts very soon. If I talk about people in other continents and even in India, if I talk about cataract, is always supposed to be a little bit age related, where the cornea becoming opaque and the transparency lost. But there young children suffering from cataract so much. Cataract, glaucoma, very common condition there. Young children suffering from that. So all these things happening for the last few years, decades, a couple of decades, and it has been found that it is majorly because of the presence of ultraviolet radiation so much, exposure to ultraviolet radiations. It is not only that defective birth, these ultraviolet radiations are also responsible for bringing about small changes in the DNA, and in the next generation, this is getting expressed. So all these are the effects of ozone layer depletion. So what is the most important problem of if the ozone layer is getting thinner? What will be the major problem? The penetration of UV radiations will be much more. If the penetration of UV radiation is much more and the release of the CFCs and HCFCs is much more from the surface of the earth, then what? Ozone is getting broken down. Oxygen molecule and oxygen atom. We have studied oxygen atom is very unstable and it starts reacting with the chlorides, HCFCs. When I say what is the full form? Chlorofluorocarbon. So those chloride ions and oxygen starts combining together, and this resulting in the formation of a very toxic compound in the air. Okay, I'll give you 6 questions. Just let us take 2 more minutes. I will give you 6 questions. And this, what we are going to answer the next day, and we move on to the next chapter next day. What is ozone? Just take those questions. If possible, you will answer. Otherwise, if you are not able to answer, we will discuss in the class. You go through the volume, try to answer this. What is ozone? Number 2. Write the significance of the ozone layer. Write the significance of the ozone layer. Write significance of the ozone layer. Your answer should be in 2-3 lines. Number 3. Number 3. What do you understand by depletion of ozone layer? What do you understand by depletion of ozone layer? This is a general topic. You can write extra points also, not a problem at all. What do you understand by depletion of ozone layer? 4-5 lines for this answer. Number 4. Write the most important chemical compounds. Write the most important chemical compounds responsible for this depletion. Most important chemical compounds responsible for the depletion. So I want you to write not only CFCs, you can write CFCs, HCFCs, and halogens. All these you should be mentioning. These are the most common ones. Number 4, that should be right. Number 4 or 5? 5. 5. Mention 2 major sources of release of this chemical components. 2 major sources, meaning the refrigerators and all this, right? Coolants, etc. Mention 2 major sources for the release of these chemical components. The last one, number 6. Number 6. Write any 2. Write any 2. Write any 2. Impact of ozone layer depletion. Write any 2 impact of ozone layer depletion on plants and animals. Write any 2 impact of ozone layer depletion on plants and animals. Okay? Try answering this question. These are general concepts. You can refer to the book, volume. And we will discuss this in the next class. In the next class, we'll start heredity. Control coordination है. अच्छा, that you decide and tell me next class what is necessary for your school. You tell.
Tuesday को है हाँ नहीं